I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hello, this is the Harbor in Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Alright, so feedback is greatly important. Feel free to reach out to me, and those sources will be provided for you. Alright, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Spreaker, for one, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. Alright, speaking of Pandora, it is apropos to the topic of today. Well, or whenever you listen to the topic of this particular show. So, Greek mythology, specifically Greek gods and Greek goddesses, is an interesting mix of figures and an interesting aspects of imagery and lessons to learn about them, to learn about the aspects of humanity and the plight of morality and everything else in between. This particular god, this time I'm focusing in on, is Poseidon. So this goes with the aspects of what I'm talking about this summer, about sea and folklore and everything in between. Here we go. Alright, so before I get into facts about Poseidon, here's my thoughts. As I was saying about the aspects of Pandora's box, it's a really good example of that. And then going on to Poseidon. Alright, so these stories and fables and tales are quite different, but they all rhyme in the same idea of that. What does in itself power bring you? So, in the case of Pandora's box, all these entities of secrets and unfolding into a box, and then what comes out of it, the story tells that. On the case of Poseidon, he's the ruler of the sea, and he takes hold of that. You know, he's in the infamous wisdom of Poseidon. You better, as legends say, appreciate the sea and take honor and bounty and care of the sea. Because if you don't, havoc can break. And then his story is quite interesting too, and I'll get into the aspects of everything else. For those who know and those who don't, you're in for a treat. So, also it's quite interesting with the aspects of seeing Poseidon as, in a sense of like a saint, or or patron, or in this case more of a saint that you pay homage to that sailors and fishermen, all that, pay homage to, as to wish them great bounty and safety on the sea. And I don't know, I can't, I've said this time before, but the aspects of, it's quite interesting when we get into different, imagery about the aspects of religion, especially when you get into the subject matter of something being sacrilegious, like in a paganism and any aspects of that, of how does that quite work in the realm of spirituality? How does that work with the tradition and the aspects of Christianity or other religions and the respect to it? And then how does that work when, when people have different points of views about religion, and they see it as in the aspects of historically from, time being, and then relate to the aspects of it. There's, a lot of similarities to the aspects of stories that have been told. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Stories that have been told in the aspects of Greeks and myths and Romans and myths. And then when you underlay the aspects of real people and that are related into religion, specifically Christianity, how does that all work? It's one of those things, and then also, to wrap everything up, also, it's one of those issues, when you look at it like this from the outside in, if this makes any sense. Here, this is where I'm going with this. So, looking at faith in itself, particularly Christianity, and I'm talking from my point of view, from what I understand, and then other religions. This is from my point of view. It's very important to get that different perspective of what are people actually saying when they, relay overtly things that are mystifying, that is not in any realms of reality, and try to pinpoint that in the aspects of how people go about themselves and how legends and folklore goes about themselves in our culture, in our society. They're really good lessons to learn because they, in itself, bring value to the point being of what do these things symbol to certain people. and I've said this before, and I'll keep saying this and keep stressing this point here. Now, when we look to, specifically in this case, folklore, it's in itself surrounding the aspects of what is the culture and the society expressing in themselves about bringing importance to these things. What is the morality about it, or is there any morality? What is really being said about the values and the systems within that value? Well, not system. Let me not say that. The overall ideas and the perspectives. What are people actually, bringing in their thoughts about having these things linked to, culture. And then specifically, what does that really mean, and what is really being said about the aspects of tying that into, praying or giving respects to a God in order for safe travels. How that relates to actual religion, particularly when we get in the aspects of Catholicism, and then in the aspects of Christianity and all other religions. What is being said about that? That's quite interesting. And then, also, I'm going to close on this. Now, I think it's for me personally, for religion and spirituality, I think it's quite important to see other points of views and bring that in to enrich your own faith. And that way, that, reestablish what you believe in. And I think that at the heart of the matter, that's what's really important with the aspects of faith. Things that you don't necessarily believe in, and that has been presented in culture and everything else, and other religions that you don't necessarily believe in. How does that relate to your own faith? And then what does that reestablish your own faith, or does that bring up questions? What do those things mean? And I think that's really enriching to the mind, and that's something to consider and think about in the overall aspects of gods and goddesses in Greek mythology and Roman mythology and culture. All right, with all of this said, that was a whole lot all at once. I can understand that. If not, then, I like to know what you all think. Just enriching thoughts before I get into the facts of the matter of everything. So feel free to reach out to me if you want to continue the conversation about the aspects of faith and how pagan, other religions and then paganism, how those things interplay, and what is your point of view about all these things in our culture, in our society? All right, with that said, moving on to the facts about Poseidon. Here we go. Okay, and of course, sources will be provided for you here. All right, so
stop by Sherwin-Williams and get 30% off select paints and stains June 13th through the 23rd. It's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Refresh your home inside and out with colors that make every space feel brand new. From cozy interiors to stunning exteriors, we've got the perfect shade for your next project. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Starting out. Says Poseidon was the Greek god of the sea, earthquakes, storms, and horses, and one of the 12 Olympian gods. He was the son of Cronus and Rhea, and had siblings that included the very infamous Zeus, Hades, Demeter, and included in that Hera, just to name some of them. So he is the Roman equivalent to Neptune. Now, Poseidon was known for his trident, which is used to control the seas and cause, and its lesser extent, which causes earthquakes. He was also associated with horses, and it is said that he created the first horse to impress Demeter. Poseidon was married to Aphrodite, a nerdy, and they had several children, including Triton, Theseus, Polymeson, and others. So he is also known for his temper and his vengefulness, as seen in his punishment of Osiris after the hero blinded his son, Polymesus. So Poseidon was also involved in various myths, such as the competition with Athena for the patron of Athens, where he created a salt water spring. But Athena's gift of an olive tree was chosen instead. He was also created with the creation of the legendary island of Atlantis. So in addition to his mythological role, Poseidon was worshipped by the ancient Greeks, with temples and festivals dedicated to him, such as the Temple of Poseidon and the aspects of the Isthmian Games. Also, the Anonis, as I mentioned earlier in my thoughts, sailors and fishermen often pray to him for safe travels. Alright, so it's also quite interesting in the aspects when we get into pop culture, particularly television, literature, movies, and so forth, when the subject matter is about Greek gods and goddesses and Greek mythology, Roman mythology. So there is a interesting show that covers this from a different point of view, where it's a New Zealand show. It's called The Almighty Johnsons, and it's particularly centered around the aspects of gods and goddesses, and it's quite honest into the aspects. It's humorous, but it's honest into the aspects of the pursuit of the overall being about the lineage and of pursuing love and conquering love, and any aspects of finding that overall, uniting that overall being of that conquest of love to, in itself, gain the main character's, true identity. And that's something to take a look at if you're interested. And I believe it's still on Peacock. It's called The Almighty Johnsons, for those who don't know. So anyway, my whole point being is, it's quite interesting when we get into entertainment and they start relaying the aspects of how gods and goddesses have, when they get in the business of relating them to humanistic qualities. They show, for instance, Aphrodite, showing her, relaying her into certain aspects of having, this is what she would be like if she, had human traits, and she would particularly be somebody, a woman that's, relaying to the aspects of like a influencer or TikTok superstar, or when I was growing up, a Paris Hilton or Nicole Richie, someone of that type. And so that's also a different, social commentary about the aspects of the influence that gods and goddesses have on our culture, because they say a lot about, in itself, the value of the morality of what these figures bring and what these figures are speaking on when it comes to the structure of how people feel and think about different aspects of themselves, and then in different aspects of belief systems here. It's quite interesting. All right, so with that, let's say I'm going to wrap everything up, and I am going to go into some more interesting, even deeper into the aspects of Poseidon. All right, here we go. So, Poseidon in ancient Greek religion, god of the sea and water generally. So, as I was saying about earthquakes, he is distinguished from Pontus and the personification of the sea and the oldest Greek divinity of the waters. The name Poseidon means either husband of the earth or lord of the earth, traditionally. He was the son of Cronus, which was the youngest of the 12 Titans, and was a son of Cronus, the youngest of the 12 Titans, of the Poseidon, of Cronus' sister and consort Rhea, a fertility goddess. So Poseidon was the brother of Zeus, as I was saying, the sky god and chief deity of ancient Greece, and of Hades. So, god of the underworld. When the three brothers disposed their father, the kingdom of the sea fell by lot to Poseidon. His weapon and main symbol is the trident, perhaps once a fish spear. Quite interesting. So according to Greek poetry, Poseidon's trident, like Zeus's thunderbolt and Hades' helmet, was fashioned by 3 cyclopses. And then cyclopses are interesting enough with the aspects of how they play into myths and legends. And what I mean by this is, how does that relate into the aspects of telling these tales with, a good example of this would be the aspects of David and Goliath. So, in reality, David and Goliath, possibly, in reality, the situation was a person that was quite tall, or, somebody they never seen, and even though from modern point of view, he was probably average height, 5'5" or 5'7", so forth, and then, and it's something that throughout time it was told that it was this great giant that he defeated. And then, when we get into Cyclops, is this really making commentary or trying to figure out the aspects of people with deformities and so forth. All right, so as the god of the earthquakes, Poseidon was also connected to dry land, and many of his oldest places of worship in Greece were inland, though these were sometimes centered on pools and streams or otherwise associated with water. In this aspect, he was known as Earthshaker and was worshipped as a stabilizer. So as the god of horses, Poseidon is thought likely to have been introduced to Greece by the earliest Hellenes, who also introduced the first horse to the country about around the time of the 2nd century BC to be exact. So Poseidon himself fathered many horses, best known of which was the winged horse Pegasus. So Poseidon came into conflict with a variety of figures and inland disputes. Notable among these was the contest for sovereignty over Antica, which he lost to the goddess Athena. Yes, ma'am.
I don't want it.
You don't want that no more? Okay.
I want something else.
Okay. I'll make you something else, okay? Okay. Despite losing, Poseidon was also worshipped there, particularly at the Knossos, also known as the hippopotamus of horses. So Poseidon's offspring were Marad. He was the father of Pelosus and Neleus by Trio, the daughter of Telemosis, and thus became the divine ancestor of the royal family of Telenasi and Mycenae. Many of the sons became rulers in other parts of the ancient Greek world. Otherwise, he had many monstrous offspring, including giant and savage creatures such as Orin, Antios, Polymesus, to name a few. So, Poseidon also was married to Oceanid, with whom he also had multiple offsprings, including the sea creature Triton. So the chief festival in Poseidon's honor was the Isthmi. Excuse me for the pronunciation. This scene is very famous in its athletic contests, including horse races, which is celebrated in alternate years near the Isthmus of Corinth. His character was a sea god, which eventually became his most prominent aspects of how to know him in art, for art and art purposes. Yeah. And he was represented with the attributes of the Triton, the dolphin, and the tuna. So the Romans, ignoring these other aspects, identified him with Neptune as sea god. So this reaches the end. I'd like to know what y'all think. Feel free to chime in and continue the conversation by emailing me on so forth. And follow me on social media and follow me on Substack. I'm coming, sweetheart. This reaches... I'm coming. You gotta be patient, baby. I better wrap it up right quick because my baby needs me. And you know how y'all know how it is with children. They're sweet little angels, and enjoy every minute of it. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye now. Piper, hold on.